Very good. You've got a brew or water, then that's all good. And we'll try and finish promptly at 1:45. So let's get into it. We're joined today by Ian. What I like to do, lots of brew. I've never done that before. If I mention a brew, everybody takes a slurp out there.
Or say cheers.
I quite like that. Cheers. I'm going to incorporate that very much into the agenda.
At least it gets some action from the audience, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I feel I need to just give you, for it to be making and doing, I need to give you some stuff to work with. So you've got the option there to interact. And if at any point you want to take pictures and throw it on the span board, that's great. So over to Ian. So what I said to Ian came, I know of Action Coach. I've come across a few Action Coaches in the past. And what I really love about the approach, and Ian can probably tell us a bit more, but for me, the pattern-based approach to the tactics and the strategies, and these are tried and tested techniques that work. And when Ian and I spoke, I said, how about, rebuilding a business? We're going through really tough times. What are the kinds of patterns and tactics that we could and should be looking at that we can knock about together now, base a conversation on it, and actually we might be able to take that to the people that we work with as well. So without further ado, Ian, how are you set for sharing with us? Let's just start with one, I think, and then if it works, we'll go around. We'll try and get around two if we can manage our time effectively.
Cool. Yeah, so I'll admit I'm a little fresh to the whole idea of this. So as you're talking, I'm thinking there's lots going through my mind. There's lots and lots of questions we could ask at this moment in time, and that we do ask of businesses at the moment. So maybe I'll just throw a few at you, and you can choose one out of there.
Yeah.
One of the big questions I'm throwing out to a lot of businesses at the moment is, if you were to step back in time to that moment when you started your business, when you had that brainwave, when you decided for whatever reason that you were tired of the idiot you were working for and you're going to go work for another idiot yourself, if you were to step back to that moment, what would you do differently? Because for so many businesses now, this is a relaunch. I'm reframing this for so many businesses now as this is your opportunity to relaunch. So in terms of the business you've got now, what would you strip out? And what did you want to have in the business in the first place that isn't in there? And if you could have the dream relaunch of your business, what would that look like? And what would, actually get into that? And I do like the whole NLP approach at this stage of saying, imagine what it would look like, and imagine what it would sound like, and imagine what it would feel like, imagine what it would smell like. What is that moment when you relaunch the business as you want it to be in the first place? It's probably the first question I'd put forward. And then I'd digging a bit more deeply. We have, as you say, Martha, we have that thing in Action Coach. We have the 6 steps to growing a business that runs with or without you is the little catchphrase. But the first step, just the first step, has got 4 issues with it. It's got mastery of time, got self-mastery, if you like, because you can't master time. It's the biggest force in the universe. And there's delivery, which is the whole process from the first touch with the customer to the last touch with the customer. And then there's actually having vision and mission in there. So what's the goal of the business?
Yep. And what would the 4th be? Did you say there was a 4th, or was there 4?
Yeah, there's a 4th, and I can never remember. I'm in the flow of it. Time mastery, delivery mastery, destination mastery, which is having the great goal there, and money mastery. And we talk, and the great phrase is money mastery, but in actual fact, money mastery for me is KPIs. What do you measure in the business?
Can we focus down? Should we focus down on that one? I only say that, Ian, because as an intro, I think what you've done there is taken us down through almost the core DNA of the approach, and then you've taken us down. And I'm only attracted to measure because what tends to happen in conversations, you're looking for that kind of hook or that common, a shared area. So if I'm going to share my second screen. So if you're making notes, what we've done there as a kind of simulation is this is the measure symbol. So if you do have the prop, you could kind of tear it off. So I'm pointing at this black background with the white cross. And what we would be doing at this point, if we were together, we'd have this in front of us all, either individually or as a group. So Ian, take us through as the measure, pick up from that measure point. How do Action Coach and yourself see those key measures in the business? Is there kind of small number of them, or 50 or 25 or something different?
There's the obvious measures for any business. Obviously, we look at profit and loss, which is fairly fundamental number. But you'd be amazed. I'm working with a supermarket at the moment, and they actually couldn't calculate their margins correctly. They actually didn't know how to calculate VAT in their business and come out with the correct margin at the end of it. So the big basic numbers and the understanding of accounting is very, very important. But then let's dig that even further back into having a cash flow forecast in place. And to have a cash flow forecast in place, in actual fact, you have to have a sales process in place. And so to run that sales process, you actually have to have that whole mechanism of how many leads we generate in the business. And if we know how many leads we generate, do we know how well we convert those leads into clients?
Wow. If I just pause you there, Ian, if people are following what I'm doing, what you've just done there in a very efficient manner, I think, is I'm interpreting what you're saying, and I'm on the fly, I'm translating it. And what that could and should be helpful to do is that, firstly, I'm listening. I mean, I would be, because it's a webinar, right? But if this was a meeting or a workshop, what I interpreted is that you talked about profit and loss, and then you mentioned margin. And I've kind of put the margin measure up here only because I guess it's a reflection of what's going on in the delivery operational space, but also the kind of supply chain with your suppliers. And that's why I put it there. I don't do a lot of writing in these sessions because it takes a bit too long, and we're trying to make it as quick as possible. It's certainly something to do with the money symbol. And I think you got onto, it was funny, I grabbed a process symbol, and then you talked about the sales process, and therefore I guess these two measures here are the leads and the conversions are somewhere related close to that customer journey. Now, I don't know how easy those concepts are for the wider community in a business, but I think I would want the validation to know that they were listening and they have some simple view of how to interpret what you're saying. Is that a fair feedback loop to you? Have I translated that logically well?
Absolutely. And you're right. It's getting that. It is actually getting that feedback loop in place. It's how much effort do we put into sales, how much effort do we put into marketing and generating leads, and then what results are we getting back out from that? And measuring that is absolutely key, because it's the easiest thing in the world to keep throwing money at marketing, keep throwing money at sales, which is why most business owners have the attitude that marketing is a cost. But it isn't. It needs to be an investment. And we only know it's an investment if we know what the return is.
Now, I know I've jumped in, Ian. I know I've jumped in, but I want to just simulate something that happens in a conversation. And I love how bold these measure symbols are kind of jumping out, because they're meant to. And if you look at my page and the other guys, if you've got your notes, you build it up, there's something that's happened here. If I just move the camera a little bit, the measures we've talked about so far are the margin. I think we've mentioned a margin, which I put here. We've got number of leads, and I think you said conversion, which I'm kind of pinning in where I am. The place people put them are really interesting because they start making connections. So I've made a little pattern there with the two measure symbols with process. But the point I'm making is here, are there any other measures? Because I'm thinking I've got some white space here. So now I'm quizzing myself. You mentioned a few more than three. What might be another two, which might be somewhere else on the board?
So that's kind of like the next stage, once you've actually got leads coming through and you've converted them into customers. Well, once you've got a customer, you also want a value for that customer, and you want the number of times you're going to come back. So like the average at Marks and Spencer, the average basket value at Marks and Spencer's pre-COVID was £13.50. Yeah. So one of Marks and Spencer's targets is to actually lift that £13.50 to a higher number. Yeah. So another £1.35 in that basket is a 10% increase in their turnover.
Lovely.
So how do you get that £1.35 extra in the basket?
So what I've now pinned out by this fella on the right-hand side, which is around number of transactions, and on the bigger version of Big Pick, you can see there's a yellow line that loops back around. So basically, I think you've mentioned probably 5 that span the board.
I think I've mentioned 4 so far. I've probably mentioned 3, and number 4 would then be actually the number of times somebody comes back and how many repeat transactions we get with them.
Brilliant. Now, so for me, that is a translation. And the question is, given you've gone through that in kind of quick fire style, that translation, getting that validation back from the wider team, and let's remember someone else in the business might have some views that are worth sharing, that gives you that ability to see what they're hearing by them expressing themselves on the big picture in front of them, to sort of express themselves. And then I guess that gives you a foundation on which to do all of your good stuff.
Right, so I'm just unmuting myself. I've closed down everything that moves, so hopefully there's no feedback. Just very quickly on Ian's input, which was very solid. I think many businesses don't understand what their break even is, and that's really where you've got to start from. And also many of them don't understand the difference between markup and gross profit margin. And I think those are two things you've got to know. In this climate, what is your break even? Do you know at the end of the day whether you've made a profit or loss? And then looking at it from a team point of view, I think for me at the moment, I would take a step back. And my step back is very straightforward. For example, am I furloughed? Am I remote working? Where am I at the moment? To what extent is the organization providing some sort of employee assistance program?
Yeah, no, that's excellent. So what you've done there is gone in. What you'll see I've interpreted, and remembering you don't know where the conversation's going to go in the room with a wider group. What I've interpreted there is I've put it in management and administration that there's a kind of company-wide requirement to ensure that the team have that basic level, that whatever that process is around furloughing and the necessary health and well-being around that.
I think that's fair. And then I think following on, as a team member, I would want to be going back just to that very simple basket example that Ian gave. What can I do? What can we do as a team to grow the basket? Do we just come up to people and say, can I help you? Or do we say, these are fresh in from Wales, or these are fresh in from Yorkshire, or we've just had a new delivery of, what was that mystery product that people were busy eating, the sausage rolls or whatever. So how can I, as a team member, how can I build the basket? What kind of interventions can I make in that customer stream?
So the only technology that kind of came to mind as Ian was talking was really something about modeling the business that we have, so that we start to understand the connections between all the different inputs and all the different levers that we can pull in a business, and understanding how they fit together and how they combine to produce the outputs, the mission that Ian talked about, and how we avoid all those unforeseen consequences, and understand actually the measures that we're talking about. One of the interesting ones is we talked about baskets. Now, my basket with Tesco's over the past 3 months has increased by a humongous amount. So instead of spending £40 every time I go to Tesco's, I'm now spending about 120. And that should be good for Tesco's, except the thing is, I'm only going once every 5, 6, 7 days now, where before I was going every day. So in total, I'm actually spending less, but it looks and it feels like I'm spending more. Now it's kind of working through those sorts of measures and having models that say, if these two things happen at the same time and they're going in different directions, what's the net effect of them? And totaling that up over a whole business to say, these are the levers that we can pull at the moment, and this is what it's likely to happen. And doing that in a modeling environment rather than in the real world, because as we know, even though all models are wrong, some are in fact useful and give us some clues as to what might be a good way to go in these constrained times, and what might not work at all.
Yeah.
So,
Richard, at this point,
enterprise software.
What I'd like to do is to go back to Ian on that, because I'm guessing, and I make a connection myself here, that the way you've described those models, which I've put here again in management and administration, rather than something at a particular point of the customer journey, is that you cover, I guess, some form of automation or systems, Ian. I guess I don't know how you refer to them. Just give us your take on what Richard said.
So yeah, you're absolutely right, Richard, that actually, you know, all those things compound down into a more solid result. And we actually start this presentation by saying, you know, every client wants more customers, but you can't just get more customers. You can only generate more leads and convert them better. So that's the process. Like somebody mentioned, scripting, having a good conversion process. And then once you've got the customers engaged, then it's about the number of transactions they make, as you mentioned, multiplied by their average basket size. And that then actually gives you your revenue in the business. Well, again, you know, everybody wants more revenue, but in actual fact, all you can actually do is get the customers coming back in more often and spending more money with you. Yeah. So that's the only way you can, so that's the bit that you can measure with the technology, is how frequent the customers are coming in and how much they're spending with you. But as you say, systemizing that, and the whole aspect is about systemizing 80% of the business. 20% of the business will need humanizing, so the exceptions will need humanizing, but 80% of it actually needs to sit in the system, and then every morning when the business owner fires up his laptop, he's got a dashboard in front of him. And we advocate that dashboard has written on it how many leads you've generated, how many what your conversion rate is in percentages, what the average basket size is, what the number of transactions are. And these numbers then fall out so you can see the performance of your business. And by measuring it and demonstrating it every day that you come on your computer, it focuses the mind. And this is really about getting focus on those numbers, because what we measure and what we focus on intrinsically improves by 10% anyway.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is Ian did cover the money side of things fairly well. But the one thing that I have found, especially in this environment, is that people are still talking about how much money we can make, rather than in this period of time thinking of how much money we can save. So as a business, I've been going into businesses, sitting down with them and going through the whole process of understanding where they're spending their money, because the more that we can save money for them, the more opportunities they will have of staying in business and being able to grow the business later on. So I'm seeing money in a completely different way with this situation, and I would be putting money down in the management area, and the process that I would be going through would be having a look at my all of the outgoings, the break even, to understand how I can actually save money for my business, and then carry on with all of the sales and the marketing and getting people to come and buy my products. Yeah. So that was my thoughts on that.
So we've got
and then I shared with you.
Yeah. What did you share there, Hugh? Did you put something on the board? I think you did.
I did, yeah. I use something that I call the traffic light system, and this is one of the KPIs that I have with all of the sales teams and marketing teams that I work with. And basically, it is a very simple system. On the beginning of the month, you've got 0, and then at the top end, on the 31st day, 28th day, whatever month it is, you've got how much money that whatever your target is. And then the middle circle is that you update it daily. So if you've got a sales team and the sales guy brings in, £1,200 that day, you put down 1,200, and it climbs through until you've met your target. And it is a very efficient, simple way of you seeing how the people in business is doing, and yourself seeing how the business is doing as well.
I think the theme in this conversation, and you've all done it as collaborators in your own way, is that Ian's presented with my chivying along this kind of view of these measures, which revert around the customer journey, running left to right. However, when we've gone to team, when we've looked at technology, and when we've looked at process, actually we're looking at things maybe in the management and administration area that would buoy up and make sure everything would happen above. Now, I'm sure with time the conversation could be directed down specifically to say, if we pick this measure here, which is the number of leads, what you can then say in the conversation as it flows is, how does the the team, how does the technology, and how do the processes support that specific measure? Whereas we're looking at the whole. Actually, you could take these over, clear the board, and say, how does this cluster work just for the number of leads?
The biggest challenge is actually, to be fair, the biggest challenge is the mindset. It's actually that mindset shift from we're going out and doing sales and marketing to actually we're not. We're actually putting a process in place that's just testing and measuring. This is just mathematics. And making that shift from it's a sales and marketing, it's a marketing campaign, because everybody loves to go and engage a marketing campaign because they're going to get more sales out of it. But to actually turn that on its head and say, actually, we need to do test and measure. Because test and measure will drive everything we do. We can only influence that we can measure. We can only manage that we can measure.
And do the team need to be on board for that, or can the management team implement that change in mindset themselves?
So from my perspective, my personal belief is the team have to be on board from the outset. They have to understand what that's about, because they have to actually make input to that. Because when we get a target, if we're given, so a great example for me was I was working with an estate agent at the end of last year. He could not get enough leads from his team. And his team were all franchisees, so they had a vested interest, but they were not generating enough leads. So we dug back into just the 5 strategies. And it's just basically how many phone calls these guys making every day. Yeah. And when we did the mathematics, it came to 5 phone calls, 25 phone calls a week, 5 phone calls a day.
Yeah.
We transformed his business in a 20-minute conversation that went, how many phone calls are they making? Don't know. How many do they need to make? 5 a day. What was going to make 5 a day? Transforms the business.
Yeah.
So it needs to bleed right the way down to the team members, and they have to understand why they have a target, because it has to be a common goal.
Yeah. And I think in terms of creating action leading to outcomes, my experience is involving the wider team in that conversation is one way to increase the chances of that day-to-day behavior changing, which is my kind of whole take on engagement, that you involve more people in that conversation. So a change in mindset to the business owner or the senior team is one thing. How I think organizations, what they do less well is translate that into the wider team, and how do you get them on board? And if we see that in the context of an opportunity, you can refer to something that's come out already. But in terms of kind of measures, I guess the opportunity is back to where we started, which is the measure on the cash flow, the profit and loss. But is there another kind of opportunity there that is related to measures that might not be so obvious?
So the other good things that happen when you get measures in place is everybody starts to share the goal. And that's the kind of ancillary benefit. Once we actually, for a business, decide what the mission statement is and what the goal is. See, I always relate business to a game of football, and I'm no great fan of football, I'm no great football follower, but for me, it's very much like football pitch has the sidelines marked out. Yeah. And you know when you walk onto that pitch that you're actually abiding by the rules of the game. And the game is you can see the goal. You know where the goal is. It's big and it's wide and it's the end of the pitch. That's what we're all aiming towards.
That's nice.
Now, every team member makes their own contribution to doing that. Whatever position they have on the pitch, they have their own contribution towards getting that ball towards that goal. Yeah. And everybody has a common rule book. If you walk onto that pitch with a rule book for hockey, it ain't going to work. You have to have a common rule book. Yeah. When you bring all those factors together, common goal, common rules, and everybody knowing they're contributing to that final kick, that's when you bring it all together. But more often than not, they actually need to know what it is that they're tasked to do in so much detail that they've got a KPI that they can get measured against to know that they've actually passed the ball on to the next player.
Yeah. And what's interesting, the way we approached it, for time, we didn't really go into the purpose and the goal at the top, but I think there's some backdrop there that's fundamental to understanding. Does everybody even get what that goal is and what the purpose of the business is? I always say, if you ask your colleagues, what would they say? And it often stops people in their tracks, because however clear one person's view of the business is, that is very unlikely, because we all are individuals and people, and we all have different points of perspective. Bringing it onto that same page and that framework is a really worthwhile conversation. So as usual, I would love to go into more depth and breadth and left and right and arms and legs, and I always do everybody a disservice by cutting them off and interrupting a little bit. But remember the objective of what we set out today. For me, the time flies by, but because I'm so into it and it's my baby and I want everyone to love it. However, the conversation is what we set out to have by bringing different backgrounds and different ideas together. And I think what we've been able to do by using the same board and the same lexicon and language, which isn't overwhelming or scary, we've had a reasonably good conversation about different connections, which if we had time, we could go down into in more detail. We could gather challenges and opportunities. We could get a picture of everybody who's been involved taken with the board, and that kind of gets people on board with the whole engagement and the buy-in. And then we'd get into challenges, we'd get into opportunities, and that's where, in big picture terms, we've got the kits, the physical kits that do that. We then run the great workshops that everybody comes in and has a damn good chat about and gets involved. It can get quite emotional and intense, and that's all right as long as it's within some parameters. I often end up sat on the windowsill at the back because the team take over and you've given them the props to express themselves, and you might say, there are 3 challenge symbols, there are 3 opportunity symbols, and they say, but there's 10 things to do. Well, actually, you haven't got time to do those 10 things, so you use a bit of scarcity with the physical props. Those then can turn into programs, i.e. where is the business now and where the business can be in the future. So you've got that as is and that to be.